a big aha for me was that they explained that in the Tantra worldview, the sexual, reproductive, creative energy is the divine energy of life.
Before we dive into this week's episode, let's talk about a brand we both genuinely love, Cytoplan. You've probably heard us mention them before, and that's because their supplements are next level.
Yes, Cytoplan has been part of my routine for a while now. They just get it when it comes to health. Their whole approach is rooted in science and totally in tune with nature.
Exactly. Their formulas are bioeffective, which basically means the nutrients are in forms your body actually recognizes and uses properly and at the appropriate levels. Cytoplan is used and trusted by health practitioners across the country. Their formulas are developed by nutritional therapists and backed by over 3 decades of clinical insight. You really can feel the quality when you take them.
Plus, it's not just about what's in the bottle, it's the mission behind it too. Cytoplan is 100% owned by a charitable foundation, which means everything they do is about helping people live well for longer. It's not about trends or quick fixes, it's about real, lasting health.
That is so wonderful to know. And whether it's our energy, perimenopause, menopause itself, sleep, immunity, or just staying on top of your health, they've got you covered. You can also get a free health questionnaire and a consultation by ringing the helpline.
So if you're ready to take ownership of your health, check out Cytoplan, powered by nature, proven by science, and rooted in purpose. We'll pop the link and an exclusive 15% discount code in the show notes. We would like you to be aware that in this episode we discuss themes including child abuse and the healing of childhood trauma through Tantra training. These topics are discussed in a respectful, conscious and caring way, but we wanted to let you know in advance. Hello, I'm Karen Mellors.
Hello there, I'm Dr. Rosy Daniel.
You've just tuned in to Alive and Loving It, and we're here to help you bring joy and energy back to your life. Hello, my dearest Rosie. Here we are again.
Oh, hello, Karen, and welcome back from Mexico.
Thank you. I'm sat in this chair again, the best part of my week, and it's very special to be with you again this week, Rosie. Do you realise that we have done now 11 months of weekly recordings?
Wow, incredible. And what fun. It just seems to be getting better and better, Karen.
It does, and it's well over a year now since we were planning the podcast. And actually, I was thinking into it this morning, and it feels like we've been building up to these 3 episodes where we've been talking about relationships, because the subject matter has been so tender and profound, and actually one that sometimes is not talked about in mainstream, that I think we've had to get into a rhythm together. We've had to deepen our relationship. I didn't think it could go any deeper as friends, but we've had to deepen that love between us, and we've had to deepen this space to be able to hold these conversations. And this is the 3rd one in the topic of relationships. And you have very bravely offered to step in to be our guest this week and to share what is a very intimate and personal story of yours, but one that, and before we start, I just want to say how much I deeply honour you for doing that, but also I honour you for doing the huge amount of deep inner healing work that you've done here, Rosie, to now at your stage in life be able to look back and access that wisdom and then graciously share it with us all, love. Thank you so much. And I also know it's that work and that sort of healing that you've gone through, which has it gives you the depth of integrity that you've got and the depth of holding to be able to hold so many others like you do through traumatic experiences. So I just wanted to honour that before we start, love.
Well, thank you so much. It means such a lot, and it is. I can really feel that how much I've shifted from the person I was when I embarked upon this particular healing journey.
Yeah, yeah. So why don't you start? It's your story. I know you want to tell us about how you discovered this deeper healing through Tantra. But why don't you start at the place where you want to start, Rosie?
Okay, well, we were thinking about who might be a good person to talk about an experience, and we were putting forward ideas, and the penny suddenly dropped that I have a really important story to share. And where it really started for me was that I was in my younger years, 20s, 30s, really struggling to make a good relationship with men. I had a very, very good relationship with a female friend who I think saved my emotional life, actually. But I kept on choosing guys who were really absent. And my first husband was a Jungian analyst, and I chose him thinking, well, he's really going to understand me and be close. But actually, he was introverted, and he seemed to prefer his own company to mine. And I felt very lonely and isolated and unmet in that relate. There were good parts too, but I wasn't getting my emotional needs met. The next guy I was with, it was worse. And the one after that, he was so absent. I think I saw him 3 times in a year while I kept on wishing and hoping and longing and praying for, this whole thing to kindle. And I tried counselling and all kinds of psychological approaches because I obviously realized it was to do with my relationship with my parents and my father, but it really didn't make any difference.
How interesting, it gets worse and more frequent. I've heard that so many times, I believe it as well, that the what's causing the pain gets more frequent and more intense the closer you get to healing it.
Well, or being fed up enough to do something about it.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Be at the point of like, this is enough. And now I'm at the point of change.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I was beginning to think, is this an illusion or a fantasy that I can have a really tender, close, connected relationship? But then I started to hear friends of mine, respected friends. I was working alongside a guy called Dr. Roger Litchi, who was partner to Leora. And I began to, and this is Leora we had on our last episode, who just gave us the most fantastic understanding of what Tantra is and Neo-Tantra. So if anybody hasn't listened to that, really, really do go back and listen to Leora. But I started hearing my friends talking about Tantra, and I was intrigued. The only thing I knew about Tantra was Sting and Trudy and, bliss and yogic, it being a branch of yoga and a way of achieving blissful consciousness through sexual union and raising of sexual energy. So that was the only thing I knew about it. But I thought, well, let's have a go. So I went to a weekend of Leora's, and it was exquisite. It was, I would say, the whole process, the whole weekend of a group of us who'd never met, just becoming re-sensitized. So she did I can remember to this day, an exercise she did where it was called Awakening of the Senses. And we all got comfortable, and they blindfolded us. And bit by bit by bit, they started very gently, a group of the leaders and assistants, to re-sensitize us. So they crinkled things by our ears, and they wafted beautiful smells under our noses. And I think they popped a raisin or a sultana in our mouth and just said, just sort of feel that. And so bit by bit by bit, they got our senses awake. And then finally, they took off the blindfold. And in the process of doing this exercise, others had been adorning the room with beautiful colors and twinkles and sparkles and lights. And it was like we woke up in an Aladdin's cave of beauty. And just in that hour's exercise, it made us all realize the degree to which we numb ourselves and overstimulate and dumb down our receptivity. And so far from being about sex per se, it was about sensitization. And I was intrigued, went on, booked into a whole 30-day training with John Hawken and Hilary Spenceley, who founded Skydancing Tantra, and embarked upon this journey. And in the very first 5-day block, they said some things which just really turned the lights on. So one of the things they started by saying was that the right relationship of man to woman is devotional. Wow. So that was like, oh my God, there is hope. There is this possibility of receiving that attention and devotion that I was so deeply longing for.
Exactly. So straight away it validated your feelings. And because, a few minutes ago you were saying, is it true that I actually should have this in my life, that I deserve this? So to validate something that big for you at the beginning of what was quite an intense course then. So how long was this? Because I think it's sort of 5 days, so many.
Yeah, 6 lots of 5 days over a year and a half. And we had 26 of us in the group, and we were all committed for the long run. But the next thing they said, which really rang bells, was that they were saying the reason for this disconnect between men and women is these lots and lots of reasons, but some of the primary reasons, it's a vicious cycle that as women's self-esteem gets lower and lower and lower, and they feel less beautiful and less gorgeous and less goddess-like, that they can't receive. So they're longing to receive, but they can't receive because there's no place for it to go.
So there's hurt there with low self-esteem. The body numbs out, becomes desensitized to everything. And then that is what is affecting a relationship with another person.
Yes. And you can spot it a mile away. You say to somebody, gosh, you look beautiful today. Oh, well, I got it from a charity shop. Or, I tried to give a dinner party for a very, very beloved friend. And, she was an hour late, then 2 hours late, then 3 hours late. And she finally turned up with a bunch of flowers that was as large as a bush, to give to me to say how sorry she was, but that she'd chosen to go and lead a support group. And I'd made a sort of 3-4 course dinner for her birthday and to honor her. But it was like she had to turn it around and bring me the massive bunch of flowers because she hadn't been able to receive my gesture to her.
So easy for us to give.
Yeah.
And very hard for us to receive.
Yeah, because when we're giving, we're in control. When we're receiving, we're vulnerable. And we're not in control in the same way. So
what impact did it have on you hearing this guy say that actually the devotional from the male is the right state, the right relationship?
Well, it was like manna from heaven. I thought, I'm in the right place. I'm on the right course. This is great. And I could completely relate to the not being able to receive, because it's not just not receiving compliments or lovely dinners. It's not being able to receive touch or pleasure or, being numb to the pleasure, because of being so frightened or anxious in a situation where somebody might be trying to give to you, but you're kind of blocking it and, in such a state. But the flip side was that they were saying that the male primary wound is often having been criticized or deballed by women, crushed, you're useless, you're hopeless, you can't do this, you can't do that, and that hurt. I mean, whoever said that women are more emotional than men, that is so not the truth. Men feel so deeply. And so what they were saying was that if a man feels crushed, then how much easier to go and find such sexual gratification on a porn site where the women, can excite and stimulate, but without any power to hurt them. So that is where the objectification comes in, and we've talked about, in the last episode with Leora about pornography leaving out the heart. It's the connection between the mind stimulation and the genital stimulation without the love. So we can kind of see how that happens. So then what you get in a kind of everyday couple, or the couple, or where I was, is a woman who can't receive, and a guy who's petrified to be vulnerable, and who's got a head full of pornographic images to get him aroused. So I know that's a bit of a kind of dramatic way of putting it, but it happens.
And oh my goodness, when women are in that state, to protect ourselves, don't we know how to hurt somebody else with words, with ignoring somebody? There are so many tricks that were handed down through my mother line to use to protect myself from feeling the loss of that connection. So you can see it's a whole storm, isn't it, Rosie?
Well, yes, because what happens, we then get very needy. I don't like that term, because these needs are real and legitimate. All these emotional needs. It's just like, it would be like saying it was bad if somebody was hungry or thirsty. When we feel those emotional needs, that's because we're starving for love, attention, but what can happen is we get desperate, we get very emotional, and we can flood our partners with that, that emotional need. So, and Leora did address that, how we can move from that place of almost begging for the attention we need to inviting the pleasure and the play. Loved her use of that way of looking at it.
So what happened next for you?
Well, it was the first 1 or 2 blocks of 5 days, I think, were a lot to do with us learning to receive. And to take the charge out of that, they put all the women, we were called the Shaktis, in one room, and all the men, the Shivas, in another room. And what we did in our room, I'm not sure what they did in their room, but we spent hours and hours and hours telling each other what was beautiful. So if we thought somebody's skin was beautiful, or somebody's hair was beautiful, or the curve of a cheek, or, the softness of a hand, or the shape of a bum, or whatever it might be, so we went round and round and round, and just spent time so that we filled up that ability to receive. So, because this is all framed in an Indian yogic context, we were called the Shaktis, and being given permission to move into our sense of the goddess. So it's not egotistical, it's just more to become an embodiment of the divine feminine. And the guys, as the Shivas, were being helped to move into their personifications of the divine masculine. So learning to receive was growing that well, or ability to receive, so that when they did eventually bring us together, and then the males were giving some attention or compliments to the women, it's like, oh yes, oh okay, I can take that in, I can believe it, I can receive it.
I can see why they need to run the course over a long period of time, because how many times are we told, well, just love yourself, just it takes time, Rosie, doesn't it, to build and practice. And I can really see how that reflection from other women, I think that happens in the women's circles and on the retreats, the reflections from other women help to build that self-esteem. While ever we're in competition and comparison with other women, I can see how that chips away at that. So coming together with other women who can celebrate and who can love each other, it's raising the energy for everybody in that. How beautiful.
Yes, and specifically the how to receive. So then another kind of a big aha for me was that they explained that in the Tantra worldview, the sexual reproductive creative energy is the divine energy of life. So, it's the God spark, the meeting of the male sperm and the egg, or, pollen and bees and flowers and seeds, and all of that is what they're saying. That is the life force. That is the creativity. That is the creator energy. But that in religions, what has happened is that the connection has been sort of from the heart upwards, and that the primary sexual energy has been put into the space of sin and shame. Well, wow, so that invitation to see sexual energy as the primary creative force, and to welcome it and to honor it and to allow it to move through one, not to be pushing it away and trying to hold it down and repress it. And so what I came to understand through that is that in societies where sexuality or sexual energy has been made sinful or shameful, because that energy is not going to go away, because it's primary, that when it's not allowed, it distorts and transmutes often into violence and control and abuse. So that was, wow, that was I really got that, because you see that, don't you? You see in situations like, care homes or the forces or religious orders, where there are vulnerable people being really dominated by those who are in charge, how much abuse we hear about, because that sexual energy's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, you see it in a lot of groups. And actually, I remember when we were doing the community topics, we were talking about, we touched on that point of making sure that the energy within a community is clean, collaborative energy, and not where there's somebody that's trying to get into a position of power. And what you're saying now is that is an urge to feed something else or to replace something that isn't actually there, that connection to life and to, yourself, the universe, and it's so ironic that actually people describe it when they feel that connection, is that they feel like God is inside them. And yet what we're talking about is religion and the part that it's played in severing that.
Yeah. And if you think from the yogic point of view with the chakras, the sexuality is in the root, and then the second chakra, relationship, and the third one, power and dominion. And this is where the mayhem goes on. And, when you look at people who are in control of our planet and governments and, those people, and not everybody, but a lot of people in positions of power are coming from their shadow as opposed to their light. Now, there are brilliant leaders, and when you're in the presence of a brilliant leader because they shine, whether it's Gandhi or Desmond Tutu or Nelson Mandela, there's no question of power over. It's about empowerment, So then we get to the point in this unfolding where much later on in the course, I think it was on block either 4 or 5 of 6, that John said, right, this time we are going to look at this question of power and sexuality. So I thought, okay, yep, I'm up for that, not really thinking about it. So the clever people, they recruited a whole team of assistants to come and help them set up 4 different rooms around this building where we were training to create a role play scenario or a setup where we would be put into touch with feelings and energy. So the first one was a dungeon. So it was very dark, and there was the idea of people in captivity and other people, kicking them and shoving them into the dark and imprisoning them. And I could sort of feel a bit of a kind of, oh yeah, I know this energy. Then, to my astonishment, another room they'd made a cross, like a crucifix, like 12 feet tall, huge. And one of the male assistants was strapped to this cross. And at the foot of the cross was a woman dressed as a nun, who was, the man on the cross was writhing in physical agony, and the woman at the bottom was writhing in sexual ecstasy. So they were portraying the agony and the ecstasy of that religious model. Then, very strong stuff, but it didn't trigger me. Then, third chamber was a sadomasochistic setup with lots of leather and whips and masks and chains and all of that. Again, fair enough, but didn't trigger me. Chamber number 4 was the headmaster's study. And we had to wait outside. Anyway, and I was getting more and more and more activated, standing outside. Then he called me in, and he was stood there with a cane, a whip, that he was just twitching the cane and cracking it in his hand. And I started shaking like a leaf, and tears started to roll down my face. And he just said, "Stop. What's going on?" And I shared with him the beatings that I'd had with my parents, from my parents, particularly my mother, as a small child, 7, 8, 9, 10, even the humiliation of being asked to choose which of 4 canes I was beaten with. And not good at all. At which point John said, "You do realize that was your parents' sexual energy." And at that moment, it was like the scales fell from my eyes. Yeah, because my whole childhood, one of my lovely teachers, Judith Hemming, says that as children, we are love drenched for our parents. And up until that point, I'd sympathized with my mother's unhappiness and, thought, oh, poor mother, she's so unhappy. She's so, I was young. I didn't have the words really, but I knew she was very unhappy and that this was why she was being violent. Anyway, I mean, that when having sympathized amazingly with what was going on at one level, it suddenly became unforgivable. And I just flipped. And what I now realize is that cleverly that I'd been taken into the visceral trauma of that experience, and that John had cracked the link. He broke the link to that trauma.
Changed the perception of it, changed your
broke that link.
Broken it of what you were almost being for your mother more than for you. Like I feel so sorry for, and overriding the impact that it was having on you. And he managed to bring you right back into presence with yourself.
And also just I became horrified and just kind of outraged that this could have happened. And obviously, if anybody's listening who knew my parents or my brothers, sisters, relatives, I'm sorry to have to put this out there, as it must be painful for others to hear this, but it completely changed almost from that moment my ability to recognize and spot men who could love women and men who could not love women, and men who were of a misogynistic type. And I think that there's a big vein of that running through the British male psyche, because, and especially in young men and boys who were sent off to prep schools and into the boarding school system, where violence and abuse were the norm. My brothers went to schools where there were fag systems, and it was almost quite normal for these older boys to mess around with the younger boys in a sexual way. So, it's yeah, I mean, I can now see that my mother came into my parents' relationship with a lot of pain from her very impoverished Scottish Presbyterian background, no, definitely sexuality not allowed, no pleasure, no, not even prettiness, they weren't really allowed pretty frocks. It was the war, and there was violence in that family. But my dad hadn't married until he was in his late 40s, so there's a bit of a clue there about how much he loved women, and he adored my mother from afar on a pedestal. But I don't think he could handle her sexuality at all, which of course makes me question his sexuality. He was 23 years older than her, and so that was the sort of energetic ambience that I grew up in.
With all those rules and judgments in that time, the squashing of beauty and desire, and all of that led to this. It almost feels like a pressure cooker, Rosie, and it had nowhere to go but to explode, and exploded towards the children. I am so sorry, love, that you experienced that, darling.
Bless your heart. I mean, it's and I can still remember. I mean, we've talked before about this kind of enough moment where people just get that sort of. I can remember eventually at the age of 10 standing up to my full 10-year-old height and actually saying out loud, "You can beat me and beat me and beat me, but this has got nothing to do with me."
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that little 10-year-old girl. Cheering her, Rosie.
And guess what? I did not get beaten again.
No.
Yeah. So from somewhere, those words popped out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And it has meant that I've been able to make a partnership with my beautiful Mike, who adores women. And he grew up with 5 sisters and an absolutely Amazonian mother, a 6 foot tall.
Oh, there you go.
Lady from Durham, a Geordie, beautiful family. And so he was bathed in female energy. He had a strong father and was the only boy. So I think he got rather special treatment, but he adores women. And he will always, almost always, take my lead and listen to me and be in that devotional space. I used to come home sometimes from work and he'd lit about 100 candles in our cottage. So the whole place was like I was walking into another Aladdin's cave of beauty.
I'm just, as you're talking about Mike and your relationship with him, I can feel the softening, the softening of the beauty and the love returning. And, you've described that right from going through a weekend with Leora where you had to come out of the numb state and be able to feel it, to be sensitized again, to be not numbing out, which You know, I can see that numbing out, Rosie, helped you survive the trauma. I mean, you can't thank you for that part of you that from somewhere inside helped you survive that period. But then you can see as you get older, it doesn't serve you any longer. And then you found this route back to feeling and being sensitive. And, you know, now there are many, many studies saying that sensitivity is our greatest strength. And people who are autistic and ADHD and a lot of the other labels who are highly sensitive people, it is being turned on its head to being that is our greatest strength. And it's what led you back to love. Amazing.
And feeling, and I've heard you say this many times, the courage to feel. And this is what happens in our women's circles, that, you know, we give each other permission to feel, and we come back alive. We come back into the room. We connect. But I think, you know, prior to that, I'd just given up on, I mean, I haven't included in this the impact of being around alcoholic parents and family, because you give up. You know, once people are away with the alcohol, and I'm sure it's the same if there's heroin in the house or other strong drugs, you know, once people are kind of gone into their intoxicated state, there's no one home for you. So you give up. So the default is that kind of collapse, and no one there. So nobody's there externally, so you're not there either. But I just want to share one other amazing thing that happened on the Tantra course, which was that, again, I think in the very last of the 6 5-day sessions, we were invited. So the room was divided half and half, a big room, all the guys down one end, all the women at the other. And the women and the men were invited to make little groups of about 5 each, little nests. And then we were invited to go across. So one woman would go across to a nest of guys, and a guy would come across to a nest of women. And we were given permission, you know, for 20 minutes, half an hour, to ask those guys for anything we wanted. Okay? So what came to me was that I was going to invite my little group of guys to stand around me. So I was sitting on the floor with 4 guys around me and one leaning over the top, and I asked them to roar. Now, where did that come from? Goodness knows. But I was just in this bath of male raw power energy. And they were roaring for about 10 minutes. And what it did for me and my nervous system was tell me that there is enough male energy in this world for me. Because that sort of, you know, the lack of male energy, the wild, raw, masculine energy was, my father was, by the way, a very darling, mild-mannered GP. But he wasn't a wild man, you know. He was not a wild man. And so I hadn't had that experience. And then once I'd had my fill of roaring, I actually got them to lift me onto their shoulders and walk me around the room like I was kind of an Egyptian queen on their shoulders. And I heard my teacher out of the corner of my ear saying, "My God, Rosie's really going for it."
I'm just thinking, only way you deserve to be queen, definitely.
So you know, that just filled up another place, you know, so that I was able to find my match and, you know, my wild man.
Well, it is a story that I've probably told myself, and I've heard clients say it as well, that there isn't anybody strong enough to hold me. That feels tender when I say it. And it's a story I tell myself to dumb myself down, to keep myself small. And I was with the roaring, I mean, that made my heart flutter. I'm like, that's a yes from me, please. That was just a definite yes. Because to be loved in your power, in our feminine energy, as big as it can get, and to lose the story of nobody can hold me is so freeing to me, Rosie. That means I can be exactly who I am, who I was born to be, and I'm still belong and I am still loved. And I'm not too much. You know, I was told that when I was little, I'm too much. And actually, we're not. Our children are not too much. They are themselves. If it triggers something within us, that's our shit to deal with.
Yeah.
And I've taken that journey with my children where, you know, we don't put that back on our kids when we get triggered. I go to my therapist with what I'm triggered with and not to the children. And that's what we're breaking. I mean, this is huge evolutional stuff, Rosie, isn't it? And we're seeing all of this dark and unacceptable behavior being brought into the light. I mean, it's so much in the news at the moment about men, particularly in positions of power, and how they have abused younger women. And it's being brought into the light. It cannot be hidden anymore.
Well, exactly. But just for a second, going back to the wild, the raw, you know, that I love that Katy Perry song, You're Going to Hear Me Roar, you know. We sing that. We sometimes have kitchen parties and put it on very loud and sing at the top of our voices, You're Going to Hear Me Roar, you know, because it's not pretty feminine, you know. It's wild and it's passionate. And so I think that that part of us, you know, wants to be met. And as much as the you know, the tender, very, very sensitive, we also want to be met in our wildness and our power, you know. So, and this is what I love about Joey Walter's work and your work with the Rising Connected is, you know, that we can with each other's support rise up into that full power, you know, which can be, it can be the raw.
Well, we've had many discussions about the healing of the feminine in women's circles, but ultimately it is the healing between masculine and feminine. And, you know, this whole movement of gender identity and becoming more fluid is part of the rising of the feminine and the healing with the masculine. I was in Egypt not last December, the December before. And as we were walking around the temples, and I got a beautiful print of the story of the south of the Nile meeting the north of the Nile, and the Egyptian story of this prophecy of the balance of the earth returning. And there were quite a few people from South America, where I've just been, who were on pilgrimage around there, and they call it Pachamama, the prophecy on two different sides of the world, which is now what we're living in this unearthing of this imbalance between masculine and feminine, and how we're moving back into balance. And what I think you've just helped me see, Rosie, is stage by stage what you went through to be able to reach that healing within yourself. And now to be able to share it with others who might help them get some clarity. And we will share in the show notes for people who want to reach out and need some support, because you don't have to go through this alone. Rosie, could you have got there without the support of Tantra?
Well, I don't think so, because I had tried, believe you me, I had tried to find this key to relationship. And I'm absolutely clear that it had to be awakened in the body for me, that visceral, that my clever teachers, who I honor greatly, John Hawken and Hilary Spenceley, they managed to access that in the visceral, I was shaking like a leaf, and he knew how to break that. He was able to break that. So I couldn't get there through my mind. But if people listening are thinking, well, I want some of that, I need some of that. I mean, the other thing that was going along in parallel was that I was part of this. I've mentioned before about having become a love-seeking missile, having been a serial adoptee of families who were giving me love and attention. I was in a loving community, working at the Bristol Cancer Help Centre with a whole group of healers and with the entire ethos of love. So I was being marinated in love. Resourced, yes, as well as going on this kind of journey. In terms of if people want to access the Tantra journey, there are many teachers. My school was Sky Dancing Tantra. Leora's Lightwoman school is Diamond Light Tantra. She's now working with individuals and with couples, but has got online courses on her website. There certainly was a website called Tantra Link, showing many different teachers, and they're different. They have different flavors. Some are more yoga based. Mine had this psychological base because John was a psychotherapist, and he did say day one, by the way, I'm not going to do therapy with you guys. But he, every now and again, he couldn't resist.
How can you resist that if that's part of who you are? I just think it's really important what you mentioned there about resourcing, Rosy, because, as health creation mentors, we never push anybody to that point of change. You can't, because the nervous system, the change to come in a visceral place will only happen when your nervous system is ready for it. And so what we encourage people to do time and time again is to resource themselves. Treatments, body work, walking in nature, eating healthily. The more you can resource this beautiful body and let it know that it is safe, the quicker you will get to that visceral change. But you're right, it's not from the mind. You can understand where it comes from. You can understand, and link it back to the trauma that happened. But that body will hold on to it until it is ready to let go and resourced enough to let go. So what incredible teachers, Rosa. and over 18 months, 5 retreat, even one 5-day retreat is intense. So to do it that often over 18 months, I mean, you are the bravest warrior queen I've ever come to know and love, my darling. And then to share it all again with us is just so, so precious and sacred, Rosy. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Alive and Loving It. We really hope that today's conversation has sparked your passion and showed you ways to open up into the vibrant life that's possible for you.
Absolutely, Rosy. I mean, we do have to remember that transformation begins with love, and that is self-love, love for others, and love for our beautiful planet. When you embrace love and you just allow yourself to receive as much as you give, you unlock the fullest potential of your life.
That is the truth, Karen. And we're here to support you every step of the way on your journey. So if you enjoyed what you heard today, please join our community and check out our trainings and our services such as my Dr. Rosy Daniel clinic and Karen's beautiful women's circles and retreats and the events where we can all go deeper together. And do please send us your feedback. We want to hear your ideas for the podcast, who you'd like us to interview, and the questions you want us to ask and get answered. Through the contact page on our website, just go to aliveandlovingit.org.
I've really enjoyed reading them. But when you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter and updates. And what about following us on Instagram as well? We are at our Alive and Loving It community. Once you've signed up to the newsletter, you'll receive extra notes from today's show and more inspiration to help you live your most vibrant life.
Thank you for being with us. Keep shining, stay true to yourself, and remember, this is your time to live your fullest, healthiest life.
So until next time, keep doing what you love most in life. I know Rosie and I will be. We're so excited to connect with you on the next episode of Alive and Loving It, and we welcome you with open hearts to our Alive and Loving It community.